Hello, hello, everyone. Hello, good evening. Yeah, brilliant. That's the main thing. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? Hello, hello. Hey, folks, good evening. How are you doing? Good, brilliant. Okay. Okay. When do you want to start the stream? When do you want to start the stream? We started? Okay. Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll just wait for the final people just to take their seats here. I hope everyone is well refreshed. A little bit of housekeeping. The bathrooms are just at the back here, and please do feel free to grab more pizza and drinks as the time goes on. So I'm just going to check in with James at the back here. Are we all good for the live stream? Brilliant. Perfect. Okay then. Yes, let's make a start. So welcome to this June edition of ProductTank held here at Pendo. ProductTank is part of Mind the Product, which is the world's largest product community for product people by product people. There's lots of different ways you can get involved in this community. Being here today is one of them. Being here online to watch the presentations, but you can also speak at a ProductTank. You can actually host a ProductTank, and also you can write here for Mind the Product online. Today we will be doing our presentations, and then we will have a series of Q&A at the end, which will be facilitated through Slido. I will flash this slide up multiple times throughout the presentations, but please feel free to kind of grab a picture of this or the code here for the Slido, or use that to moderate the questions for the Q&A at the end. Brilliant. So today's session, as you should all know already, hopefully, is that we'll be looking at using data as a product manager. Really, really exciting topic. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Saraj Singh, but a little bit easier to call me Sarj. And I currently work within the Visa organization. So just before we kick off with the three excellent speakers that we have today, just a short word from our sponsors.
Thank you. Cool. I won't be long. Don't worry. I'm not going to give you a spiel and a demo and stuff like that. So good evening. My name is Anna. I'm one of the directors here at Pendo. So who's actually heard of Pendo before or used Pendo? Oh, loads of people. Great. Okay, so for those of you who do or don't know, Pendo's been going for about 10 years, HQ'd in the US, but we've been going about 4 years in EMEA. And we've got 3,000 customers globally, and this is our European HQ in this office. So really fantastic to see all of you here. That's part of what we do at Pendo. Our founding team are a team of product managers, product people. So they are thrilled to be able to sponsor events like this, to bring all of your minds together and have some great discussions. So Pendo, for those of you guys who don't know, it's all around digital adoption, PLG, data-informed decisions. I wonder if data-driven, data-informed is a topic tonight. Anyway, I think I have that every week with my husband, who's also a product manager. Anyway, so Pendo is all about product analytics, retroactive analytics. That's the great thing about Pendo, is that we automatically capture the events happening in your platform, in-app messaging and guides, feedback collection, and being able to build a roadmap. So that's the spiel about Pendo, but two final call outs that I'd like to call your attention to. First is the QR codes on these banners. We have partnered with Mind the Product, and we have delivered a certification course, and you guys get a special discount for attending the event. So please take a picture or get that QR code so you can access it. And the second thing, we have a fantastic product called Pendo Free. So you are more than welcome after today to have a tinker around, have a look at Pendo Free and see what we have on offer. And if you'd like to discuss it more today or after today, please get in touch with the team or myself, and I'll be happy to take you guys through. So have a fantastic evening. Thanks for listening to that, and enjoy the food and snacks and lovely aircon, and have a good evening. Thanks.
Amazing. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Great to see so many people who have heard of Pendo before. Excellent. So without further ado, so we'll have talks today from Rohan, over product manager, senior product manager over at Atlassian. We have Diana, who's a senior product manager at ClearScore, and we have Candice, who is the co-founder of 173 Tech. So first speaker today will be Rohan. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Rohan. Hi, thanks for the introduction, Sarge. My name's Rohan. I am a senior product manager at Atlassian. Today, I'm actually going to talk about qualitative data rather than the quantitative data, which you're going to hear from the other speakers later tonight. A little bit about me first. So I'm actually from Sydney. I moved to London about 7 or 8 months ago. I've been at Atlassian for 4.5-ish years. I've worked on the growth team originally and worked on the flagship product Jira Software. And now, since I moved to London, I work on Jira Product Discovery, which is a product for product managers. So I will not be as gracious as the Pendo folks. You will get a bit of a spiel from me at the end, but your product managers is going to help, so I feel like it's not that bad. Does anyone use Jira Product Discovery by any chance? Oh, great. I'd love to get some feedback from you afterwards if you're around. Thank you. Onto it though. So qualitative feedback. Where does it all fit in? We have quantitative feedback and qualitative feedback. It's all part of getting the bigger picture together. Can't have quant without qual going alongside it as well. Quant's really good for telling you how much. Qual is really good for telling you why. That's why I wanted to bring it up today when we're talking about the data that we use to make decisions as product managers. We're going to talk about how we at the Jira Product Discovery team collect data and how we process data on the qualitative side today. Before I go too deep into it, I want to add a little caveat here. So I'm going to talk to you about what works for us at our level of scale. We have 3 product managers on our team. We've got thousands of customers. In your own circumstances, you may have more product managers on your team, less. You may have many more customers, B2B versus B2C. It's all different for everyone. So the tactics that work for us may not necessarily work for you. So keep that in mind as we go through it. But I think everything we show here will be relevant in some way or another. So the first one that I want to cover off is what we call our monthly product market fit survey, which I think all the folks in the room who use Jira Product Discovery have seen at some point or another. So what we do is we just pop up a little question on the bottom right once a month for our users, and we ask, how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use Jira Product Discovery? And if someone says very disappointed, that tells us that we've got product market fit from those users, and that gives us a product market fit score that we tally over time. And then once they answer that, we ask 2 more questions. The first one being, what is the benefit you receive from Jira Product Discovery? So we're a new beta product. This question tells us what customers are hiring us for. So this is really important for us as a new product to work out, what exactly is our fit from customers, our initial hypotheses on the product we build and why customers need it, are they holding true? And then the second question, how can we improve Jira Product Discovery for you? That's just the one that tells you about what features should we go about building next. 2 other things that we have is what we call the Jira Product Discovery community group. So this is essentially like a forum. All the products at Atlassian have their own community groups where our customers can ask questions or start discussions around new topics. We've also got a feedback collector. So anytime you're in the product, we have that little button that sits on the bottom left over there, and that allows you to raise a support request with us or give us a feature suggestion or the like. It's been really powerful for us. We find that the community group is really used by our power users, the most heavily engaged ones. You could also call them a vocal minority. You have to weigh that up against other channels that you get qualitative feedback from as well. The feedback collector, that's everyone in the product. What we often find coming through there is actually usability issues and the like. So if someone stumbles across a bug or finds something that they don't like, they often use that button to tell us very quickly what's wrong, and we can jump on it quickly. All these channels are complementary to each other. They're telling us stories from different users. The product market fit survey gives us about 300 responses a month. It gets to all the customers that we have. The community group, about 70 posts a month. As I said, it's our most engaged users. And our in-product feedback collector gives us 200 queries or feedback requests or whatever comes in through that channel a month. So quite a bit of volume there. What makes it work for us
as a team is that we invest really heavily in these channels. So 3 product managers, we take turns on what we call the support rotation. So we're on that rotation for a week, and it's our job, if you're on that rotation, to respond to customers. We set ourselves a 1-day SLO. That means if a customer comes to us through one of these channels, we're going to get back to them in a day. Because we invest really heavily in those channels, we've ended up with the most engaged community group of all the other Atlassian products, because we've put in the most effort into making sure we respond to all the customers there. They know that we're going to listen to them, so they invest in talking to us as well. It's been really powerful for us. Now I'm going to get into how we process the data that we collect. So you've got all these complementary channels in place. What do you do with it? How do you paint the picture? And what are the rituals that we have in place around this? So the product market fit survey that I talked to you about before, unsurprisingly, the responses that we get from customers, we just group them up and work out what's at the top and look at the trends over time, what's going up and what's going down. We've found that at the beginning, when you put something like this in place, it's really valuable. You get a picture of what your customers care about the most. And then what you find is that over time, that value goes down. You keep seeing month on month, customers keep saying the same things, and it's not very helpful. So that value declines. But when you ship something, so say, for example, how can we make JPD better for you? The most common response there was to have a better integration with Jira Software, which is one of the main products that Atlassian has. And when we ship something like that, we want to see that the next month or the month after, that it's not coming up as often in this survey. That's going to tell us, and if it doesn't, it tells us that either we missed the mark with the feature, we didn't quite get it right, or alternatively, customers are struggling to find it or extract the value from the feature as well. So it's really helpful for us to look at that come up and down. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and we initially did that manually. What we've moved towards now, because our product's getting more and more traction, there's more and more volume coming through, and it's been a bit same every month. We've experimented with word clouds and the like. But as a product manager, especially someone who joined that team like 6 or 7 months ago and started working on the product, the most valuable thing for me was just to read them line by line and actually start getting closer to our customers and putting that picture together for myself. And we also use a feature from our product to help us. I'll talk about our product in a bit more detail later, but essentially it's a home for all your ideas as product managers. And for each idea that you have, you can attach insights. So that means any data that you come across, any responses in the product market fit survey, anything that someone raises in community or through one of our feedback collectors, we add that as an insight here. So it's attached to that idea. It means when you've got something like this in place, it means that when you're going to pick up something new and start working on a new project or initiative, like the top one being getting feedback from internal stakeholders, it means you're not stuck on a cold start. You don't start with a big research journey to work out what the problem is. You've got 100+ insights to refer back to and get things going, and they're not scattered across a whole bunch of spreadsheets. We have a ritual around weekly feedback reviews. So the insights that we collect, we run through them together as a team. So that's us 3 product managers, 3 designers, and 1 content designer. We start discussing each of the insights that have come through. We ask ourselves, we need to dig a little deeper. So, we get feedback from customers. We need to ask our 5 whys and try and understand what's the underlying problem that customers are experiencing. You can't just take what you get from a surface level. And the other thing we find really helpful from this is that if we see a theme appearing, it also guides us on our roadmap. So if something's coming up more often than this week and then the week after and the week after that, we start asking ourselves, well, does the roadmap need to change? Is this actually a more burning issue? The other thing we do is we use a tool called Dovetail quite extensively. Does anyone use Dovetail by any chance? Cool, fair bit of use in the crowd. So Dovetail is a UX research tool. Essentially what we do, any interviews that we do with customers, we do ours on Zoom, we record them, then we load them into Dovetail, and it allows you to create reels. So in a 30-minute interview, you can make little clips of it, and splice them together and turn that into like a 5 or 7 minute clip, for example, and then share that with your engineering team so they can get the most valuable parts from that interview, and it's distilled and they can get a lot of value from that and understand the why behind what they're working on. That's been really helpful for us as well. A couple of learnings from the different tactics that we've put in place and how we process that data. The first is that it's really important to keep channels open to identify trends. Since we've started doing this, I've become much more of a fan of this way of working rather than doing back-to-back deep dive research studies. When you go deep in a certain area and you start speaking to a lot of customers about a given topic, you end up with a bit of recency bias where you start thinking like, well, I keep hearing the pain from customers about this topic. I think this is the thing that we really need to jump on. But when you've got these channels open, you start seeing things go up and down, and it helps you understand the relative importance of different topics that are coming up from your customers. You also need multiple channels to ensure a rounded view. So I touched on this a bit before, where the different channels that you've got in place, they tend to reach a different segment of your customers. If you are only having an in-product feedback collector, only using a community group, you're only going to be hearing from a certain segment of your customers. So it doesn't tell you enough about who all of your customers are as a whole. The analogy I like to use around this is it's like everyone's painting a picture together. You need to compile it from multiple angles to get a fully rounded view. There's no single angle that's going to tell you everything. The other one is to review feedback as a team to build a shared brain. So doing all your analysis on your own as a product manager and then coming out at the end with, hey, we need to do this, it's much more powerful to be reviewing it on an ongoing basis with your team. We find that, for example, in our weekly feedback reviews, we keep talking about the same topics again and again. And then something will trigger in, for example, a quarterly planning session. We'll say, okay, we're going to start working on this initiative now. But because we've been speaking about it every week for the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, when we say we're going to pick up that initiative, everyone sort of says, oh, okay, right, I know what that is. We've been talking about it. They've got a pretty good understanding of that topic, and everyone's sort of aligned on why we're doing it. Whereas if you were to come in with a cold start, you might write a 6-page presentation or something to that effect, and you have to convince everyone who has no context about this, hasn't really heard about it before, maybe just in passing, that we should start working around this. But that shared brain, from the rituals that you put together, from all the different channels combined, that means that it's a lot easier to get started on any of this. Last point I want to make around this is it's really helpful to combine the different channels. So I've spoken about the channels, but then there's all the different places you can get feedback. So your one-on-one customer interviews, the feedback channels we've spoken about before, and your quantitative analysis. Every single one of them has their pros and cons. Quant will tell you how much. The qualitative channels that you've got in place kind of help you with relative importance as well. But at the same time, you also need those one-on-one interviews to deeply understand why anything's happening. And that really helps with the prioritization decisions as well. So I'd strongly recommend having everything in place and not being overly biased to a certain channel. Now's the part where I get to tell you a little bit more about the product that I'm working on. It's a product for product managers. So I promise this is quick. Sarge says I can talk about it for a minute or two max. It won't be too bad. It's a product for prioritization and road mapping. We built it specifically for product teams. So a lot of the rituals that we spoke about, we've tried to incorporate them in the product in some way or another, because we want to help you get better at product management week in, week out. One of our firm beliefs is that product management is a team sport. So we will try and make it easy for you to align with the different stakeholders in your org, to work with sales, marketing, and everyone around you, and get aligned on what you're building in Jira Product Discovery. It helps you bring structure to chaos. So what we've got here is like a list view and different fields that you can apply to your ideas. So for any idea that you have, you can work out the estimate of how much it's going to move your goal. We've got a whole heap of different custom fields that you can try for the different sort of calculations you want to do in any way you want to think about cutting up the ideas that you have. There's plenty of views for comparing, prioritizing, and visualizing the different ideas that you have. This is a matrix view, so you can do a simple impact and effort of the different ideas that you have and say, okay, here's our easy quick wins, and identify your boulders over here. There's lots of different views, like the board view for keeping everyone aligned. So you can present your roadmap in a board view to show now, next, later, and get that in front of your stakeholders in sales and marketing. What we've found is that it's a team sport. So you need to get all your stakeholders to talk about that relative prioritization together. It's really a tool to facilitate those discussions and build that alignment as a team, so that we've got everyone working in the same direction, rather than you coming across once every quarter or once every 6 months and saying, we're doing this, see you in 3 or 6 months, I'll let you know when it ships. And being an Atlassian product, we connect very deeply with Jira Software, so you can track your discovery in Jira Product Discovery and your delivery from Jira Software all in the same place. It means that your developers, when they're working in Jira Software, will be also connected to what you're doing in Jira Discovery, so they'll know the why behind what they're working on. And being in Jira Product Discovery, it'll give you a helicopter view of progress. You can work out, is this epic 75% complete and the like, and you won't be bugging your developers quite as much about how work is tracking. That's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Amazing talk, Rohan. Thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. Okay, I'm just going to flash up the questions here again. If anyone's got direct questions they would like to ask Rohan, please feel free to pop them in the Slido there. Like I said, we'll loop back around at the end and we'll pick those questions up. For those who are tuning in online, I believe just around the border of the stream today, there should be the Slido code. If not, it's also here presented. Brilliant. Okay. Let's move on. Let's get on to Diana and let's listen to her talk this evening on using data as a product manager. Please, Diana.
Hi everyone. Yes, that was. Hi, my name is Diana. I'm Senior Product Manager at ClearScore, and today I'm going to talk to you about data and decision making, specifically how I use data as a product manager to make better decisions. Cool, so a bit about me. So I have been a product manager for just over 8 years. I've worked across multiple different companies, worked in B2B, B2C, and different sizes of the companies, which has given me an overall view of product management. I'm originally from Romania. I love Marvel movies. I enjoy being creative, and I combined product management and creativity on creating a YouTube channel about product management, if you want to check it out. Cool. So when it comes to data and product management, the biggest questions product managers have to answer is, what is the right next thing to build? And generally, you have a lot of different influences when it comes to making those decisions. You have your stakeholders, you have your customers, you have your team, each with an opinion about what is valuable and what you should actually be doing. But in that situation, data is your superpower. Data is going to help you to be objective. Data is going to help you to make your own opinion about what is actually important. And this is what I'm going to talk about in this presentation, is around how I have used data to help me in 3 ways. Help me identify gaps, help me validate assumptions early, and help me define success. When it comes to identifying gaps, as I said, I think it's really, really valuable for product managers to have an opinion. It's really important for you to know what you think is really valuable for the product, and you need to have an understanding of where are the gaps, or have an approach to identify what those opportunities can be. And when it comes to identifying gaps, I mainly look at 2 things. What are the product goals? And how are users using the product? I think that's where you're understanding those 2 will give you a really good starting point to be able to then identify what is truly important and where you're seeing any negative changes. So when it comes to really understanding your goals, I think it's really important as a PM to be clear on the performance of your product on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure you already know all of this and you're on top of your numbers. But this is just to share a bit about like my approach to looking at data. Every day I do spend around 15 minutes every morning checking the high performance metrics. That can be overall performance, like of the product, but it can also be how a new release or how an experiment is performing. I look at tools somewhere between Amplitude, Google Analytics, Domo to look at number of active users, how is the funnel, how is the conversion looking. I think it's really important. And one thing I have realized is that if you don't know your numbers, no one in your team actually knows them. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but you definitely need to be the person because it really helps you identify any changes. When maybe you introduced a bug or maybe something has gone wrong, just checking this data high level is going to really help you identify those things early. The other thing is I do spend an hour as a PM. I'm quite curious and I always have a lot of questions, and I just prefer to go into, for the last 3 roles, I've been using Amplitude as a tool to just understand product performance. So I'll just go in and actually either create new versions of the dashboards or dive deeper into understanding and adding layers of questions or going a bit deeper into why is this performing or what are the different layers to it. Cool. So now that you understand your performance and you understand your goals and what you're actually going to drive or your product is driving, then we move on to understanding how your product's being used. And I highlighted here a few different methods or approaches you can take. It's really important to understand the customer needs, have those interviews, but also obviously it was really interesting to hear about different ways to capture qualitative data, but have those user interviews and really understand how your users are using the product, how well does your product actually answer customer needs and where does it fall short. The other thing to say is any of those things, don't make it a one-off. You just talk to them once a year and that's enough. It has to be a continuous process of you reviewing and understanding how your product is being used. The second one is drop-offs. I really believe there's a lot of power in funnel visualization. It's so powerful to see how users are engaging at each step of the way, and it's a good visual to just understand where they're actually dropping off. That gives you an initial indication to just go and dive deeper. The third one is around mapping out the entire journey. When you are looking at a product, have a look at all the different entry points and all the different channels. Performance is going to change based on who that person is, where are they coming from, what is their understanding of your product. So you really want to understand all these different levers. And the last one is the impact your product might be having on wider metrics. You might be looking after a conversion metric, but actually what impact does that have on an NPS score, on trust, on activation, on retention overall? You really want to understand where there's that gap and where's that handover and have a really good view of the end-to-end life cycle. And I wanted to go through an example of how I identified a gap. So this is an example from Thoughtful. Thoughtful is a greeting cards marketplace, so it's an e-commerce example. I was the product manager looking at the app experience, and one of my main numbers or metrics were app revenue. Obviously, app revenue is impacted by a lot of other metrics, but for this example, I've only looked at 3. So I'll have an understanding of, okay, total number of active users, total number of orders per customer, average order value, and then I started layering different lenses to it. And one of the lenses I layered was compare app performance versus web performance. We had a slightly different journey. And when I layered that, I noticed that average order value for the app was a lot lower than the web. That then said, okay, this is an indication there's a gap. What we did next was to review the end-to-end app journey, look at the differences, understand what journeys are customers going through, and what, helping you create different hypotheses, what could actually impact that metric. And then we realized that the differentiator was, where did we present? One of the differentiators were, where did we present the special offer? So as a cards business, we had a 4 for £10 card offer, and in the web was visible from early on from the homepage, while in the app was only visible in the basket. So that really helps us. We're like, okay, this is our hypothesis. And then we did a few changes to the journey, highlighted the offer in different places and made it a lot more visible. And what that helped us achieve is get the AOV as high as the web. But of course, you also enable us to be like, okay, we know this is a tactic, or we know this can have an impact, which meant that we went on to do a lot more experiments in this area. Cool. Second way you can use data in product management, or like as a product manager, to make better decisions is to help you validate assumptions early. Whether this is like where you're beginning of a product or beginning of a feature, or you have stakeholders that have a subjective opinion, it's kind of a similar approach where you can use data to validate ideas. So at this stage, I would say there's two key considerations. One is the amount of data you need depends on the level of risk. And the second one is look holistically at the ways to get data. One common mistake I do see is that people start from a place where there's like, we don't have any data on this. This is new, we don't understand it. And then they end up with too much data on a matter of a few months, which means that people really over-index onto, let's get as much evidence as we can, and then end up into a decision paralysis where there's like, well, that hasn't actually helped us move any closer to a decision. So it's kind of similar to having no data, too much data. So it's all about finding the right balance based on what you're actually trying to validate. Which takes me to this, which is, I think, one way to look at how much evidence you need. It really depends on two things: the amount of risk the release is going to have, but also how clear you are on the problem you are solving. So this matrix will pretty much tell you that if you have a product or a feature that is low risk and you're really clear on what problem you're solving, do not waste too much time on gathering more evidence. This is the place of ship it and measure. But if you have a place where the risk is really high and the clarity is really low, go very research heavy. This should just give you an indication of actually where are we to make sure that you get those indicators as evidence as early as possible. And in order to once you know how much evidence do I actually need, the next step is to look holistically at the different ways you can get this data. Don't think about the same ways you've always thought about it. It's more around, what is the question I actually have? What do I want to validate? And what method is going to be the quickest way for me to get the answer to that question? So, validating ideas early could look like a survey, could look like a user interview. It's an A/B test, or it could be a competitor analysis. It really depends on the type of question. And this takes me to this, which is generally you can group your questions onto like 4 categories. Viability, should we do this? Desirability, do people want this? Feasibility, can we do this? Usability, is it easy to use? So depending on your category of question, you can then go off and decide how, like, the level of detail or the tool you actually want to use to get your answers. And then third part of using data to make better decisions is how you define success. Did I rush through this? Maybe. One of the biggest challenges with prioritization is the fact that a lot of the items you're prioritizing are not aimed at the same metrics. So in product teams, you very often have to balance anything between user-focused features alongside cost-saving features, as well as tech debt. And in this scenario, having really clear product metrics on what is it that your product is going to drive, what is their contribution, is going to help you be able to push back or prioritize or be able to measure any of those changes related to your product metrics. So defining success, I guess I categorize into 2 different ways. It's like, one is your product metrics. That is any of the changes your product can make towards your North Star metric or your business metrics. And then you also have defining success at the feature experiment level. Now, again, it's common sense. you'll be surprised how many times people release stuff without actually thinking what we're trying to measure and what is success. So this is why it's really important to be like, okay, before you launch something, be really clear on what is the impact you believe this feature or this change is actually going to have, and make sure there's a shared understanding so that when you get the results, it'll be a lot easier to know what you're going to be doing next. And I guess for me, like the key consideration when it comes to defining your product metrics, or your metrics, your success metrics, is the difference between lagging and leading indicators. So lagging indicators, they're very visible. A lot of people in the company already know them, but what is really important about those is the fact that they're not easy to move. They're the ones that represent the picture of the past. They're the ones that takes months to actually drive any real change. While leading indicators are a lot harder to set. Their prediction of, by users taking these actions now, this is going to lead to a better outcome. You don't have that confidence, but they're a better indicator because there's things that you can actually track now. And then you like your product, you will be able to see the impact your product is having. So why is it important to know this? Is because a lot of times if your team has a lagging indicator, like a revenue number or average order value number against it, it can take a really long time to actually see that number move. That doesn't help you, one, because you don't know. It doesn't help immediately to be like, after this experiment or after this change, what is the next thing to do? But it also doesn't help with the morale of the team, because it takes a really long time for engineers or anyone else to be like, okay, how is this work that we're putting in actually going to measure? What's the impact we're having towards the business? And then here's just some like e-commerce examples of lagging and leading indicators. So lagging indicators, again, is like the numbers everyone knows, your customer lifetime value, average order value, revenue, but they're measured on a quite a long time frame. And your leading indicators could be things like conversion rate or cart abandonment rate or time spent on website, number of promotions users engaged with, number of signups. And I think you can be really creative with leading indicators and make it a lot more specific to the outcome or like the user behavior you expect customers to take from your change, and it could be applied to product marketing, anything. That's pretty much the end of my presentation. So I'm more open to like continue the conversation. Please get in touch, ask me any questions, find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, and my website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. I'm just going to go back because I think this is a new website, right? That you've just released. I love the URL that you've got there. Really great work. Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, there'll be another opportunity as well at the end of the presentation of our next presentation to capture the Slido, but just presenting again if anyone else wants to get that up and if they have any questions top of mind. Our final speaker today is Candice, who is the co-founder of 173 Tech. I'm really delighted to be able to hand over to you now for your talk.
Thanks so much, Saj, and thank you for the speakers before. How is everyone doing? Having a good time? Great, yay, good. Good to see some friends and new friends here. So the topic today, we heard a lot about qualitative, quantitative analysis already. So what I'm going to focus on is one part of the 4 things Diana talked about on A/B testing. A little bit about myself. I tried to use 5 cute animals to describe it, but you can see I failed about 40% of the time. So I was born in Beijing, moved to Australia, then Paris for a couple of years, and then I came to London about 10 years before. I joined Bumble at the very beginning, where I started the analytics team from scratch and growing it to a big team, a very successful exit at 2019 to Blackstone for $3 billion, and also supporting 500 million of users finding love online. Anyone use Bumble here? willing to share. All right, great. Couple, that's good. That's good, still going strong. And following the exit, my original data team, we got back together. We started a data analytics agency called 173 Tech. So a little bit about ourselves. So the things we do, like for example, if you have a great product analytics tool like Pando, you want to integrate a lot of other data sources. That could be your marketing channels, your CRM tools. So having that end-to-end analytics pipeline, that's what we do. We'll be going for about 4 years after Bumble's exit. We've been helping over 30 companies since then. So the 3 principles we believe in. So when it comes to data, you want your strategy to align with your company goals and your growth objectives. And you want to make sure you have a really good data stack. So the technology side, make sure they are frictionless, really easy to use. But most importantly, all this is supporting the people. So data is not built for just a data team or just for the founders. It should be built for everyone. So everyone should be empowered with the tool stack that you have. And today we'll be talking about how data could help product managers, and specifically when it comes to A/B testing. So most of you would already be familiar with why you should be A/B testing. How many of you are testing at your current company? Or yeah, that's great. So about half in the room. So why should you be A/B testing? First of all, validating product ideas. So we heard that from Diana before. At any point in time, if you have a product team, likelihood is you will have tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of product ideas. You don't have the resources to do all of them. So what you want to do is have data guide your process. Second of all, when you're doing a MVP product, you want to release it to your market. So it's a very customer-centric approach. Send it out, listen to feedbacks from your real customers, and decide from there. Avoid very risky mistakes. So I know as a person myself, I'm quite impulsive. I like to follow my gut feelings, but data is really a good device to help you de-risk. So, follow your gut instinct, the common sense Diana talked about, but also use data to guide you on how to do the best with the minimum resources that possible. Finally, make sure you have an iterative and continuous, very efficient development process. So MVP, release it out to test in your customer base, and then from there, continuously improve with the same process. I'm going to use a very simple example to take you through, the steps you should do when it comes to A/B testing. So, back to the point before, identifying the question, right? So what is your biggest question? So in this case, this company is a subscription app. And the biggest problem they have at this point is people are not signing up for a free trial. So one of the ideas they wanted to test is the click-through, the call to action button. So we have 2 copies here. First of all, you want to define your hypothesis. So by changing the click to action button text, they will increase the click-through rate. That leads to the target metrics. In this case, is the CTA. Make sure you know the baseline. So what is a baseline? A baseline is what is your current number. So the current CTA for this company is 35%. So this is the first thing you need to know. Set the goals, know your numbers currently. And second, you want to define your test audience. In this case, you will have a control group. So that's what's currently being used in the app, and then test groups. So it doesn't have to be 50-50. It really depends on the product you have, the stages of your product, of your services, how many users you have. So you could be released to 5% of the customer base. You might also have multiple variants. So maybe you have a copy, the control copy, and 3 others. So you can do quarter, so 25% each. And then most importantly, you want to make sure your users are randomized. The reason you want to do that is so you don't accidentally introduce biases. So you might have a group that has a over-indexing on a particular segment of users. So make sure, whether you're using a tool or whether you are developing your own algorithm for user allocation, make sure you test out the randomization feature of it. So some other consideration at this stage, first of all, when not to test. So the other speakers touch upon that already. So for example, if you are a SaaS product, your user base might be in the tens or the hundreds, or maybe you're looking for qualitative feedback. So why people are not happy with my product, why people are not disappointed if my product goes away. So those things, it might be more suitable to do a survey or user group to gather feedbacks that way. And technically, sometimes it might not be possible to run an A/B test. So for example, I think this was about 8 years ago, we released the video chat features on Bumble. So this is not something you can release to half of your user base, because if I've been in a test group, I have that feature, and then someone I'm trying to call doesn't have that feature on their side, it's going to pollute my perception towards the feature, hence your results. So technically, there's sometimes you can't do an A/B test, and then there's other ways you can overcome that. So prioritize by impact. So this is, solving the most important questions for your product. We always say, don't try to fix that 1% problem. So what is a 1% problem? It's a problem that only impact 1% of your customer base. So make sure you don't do that. Make sure you prioritize by on the biggest, result you will have, where you can really move the needle. And the third thing, overlapping test. So a company of a certain size, you inevitably come into this problem. So lots of people testing lots of different ideas at the same time. And then that will lead to, for example, if you are testing a pricing, different pricing models, and then you have another team that's testing the payment page, for example, and then that's likely, will be clashing and polluting each other's results. So here, make sure you really communicate with your teams what you've been doing if you are quite small, but if you are bigger, make sure you automate those things. So have visibility, a dashboard on your segment of users, who has been subjected to what test, and then you want to have some governance as well. For example, if you are working on an onboarding flow, someone working on a subscription renewal CRM strategy, for example, then there's no problem, you can overlap. So putting in those guidelines and have visibilities in a dashboard. Lastly, counter metrics. So this is what Diana said before on the overall, the wider metrics. So in this case, counter metrics are things that cannot go down no matter what you are testing. So those are your key indicators. Could be monthly active users, could be new users registered, could be revenue, and whatever that is, make sure you keep an eye on them. So no matter what are you testing, this should not be going down. So that's that. And then I won't talk too much about statistics, but I feel like it's a very important part of the A/B test. There is a link here if anyone want to check it out. So basically, that's a testing page that you can use and share. I will go through the details in a bit. But for those of you who has a data team, you might already have all this automated, in which case you are the lucky ones. You don't have to worry about what I'm talking about next. So a couple of things to think about. Basically, the question we're trying to answer here is how long should you run your test for? And there's generally two ways to go about it. It's calculating your sample size upfront, and secondly, calculating the significance. So once you reached it, you can conclude your test. Sample size, I hope this plays. So, if you go to the website I just showed, to define your sample size first, there's a couple of things you can input here. Let me play that again. Oh, actually, I might just leave it here. So first of all, you want to know how many trials you're running. You want to know your baseline, which is 35% in this case. Oh no, sorry. How do I go back here? Here we go. So you want to know the expected effect you're trying to uplift. So in this case, you might want to say, okay, this test is only worthy for me to roll out the results if I see a 5% difference. So if I moved it from 35% to 40%. There's two buttons here, absolute. That means the absolute change in terms of the percentage conversion. And if you wanted to put it as relative, that means 5% over 35%. The other things you can play around with is the significance level. level. So most of the time we recommend 95%, but you might have scenarios you're happy with a lower confidence level. So this is one way. So in this case, we know, when I have like about 1,000 users, then I will know. So, before you start your test, if you have, daily active users around the thousands, then okay, after a day, I should be able to, get a sense of how things are doing. The next one. So chi-square. So this is when you are testing a conversion rate. So exactly this example. So did people do or not do something? I'll quickly play this. So here, what you want to do, this is a retrospective view. So as your test running, you have collected the results. So out of a cohort of 100 people, how many have converted in the test group and the control group? So only 4 data points you need to input. The successful results from each group and the trial sizes. Again, here you can tune your confidence level, again, 95%, 90%, up to the scenario you have. There's a button on the link, top right. So this website is actually really good. So once you input those numbers, you can actually share the link with your team. That would take into considerations all the data you've inputted here. The next thing I want to talk about quickly is when you do A/B testing, there's another scenario. So the example we had is a very binary. So did people click, did people not click? So there are scenarios in what you might be testing about a dollar value, so a volume-related metrics. So perhaps, how many orders did someone place? What is the bidding price? So instead of like a binary percentages, you have a list of data you collected. And this page, so in this case, you need a t-test. And what you do here is input the results from your 2 groups. So control on the left, it doesn't matter the order, but you have one side and the other. So you put in all the numbers you gathered from your test. And again, what you can change is the confidence level. And then the hypothesis size is whether, so the t-test has 2 tails. 2 tails means, do you care about it is one-sided or it is both? So is it bigger on one side or is it bigger on both sides? Feel free to come, it's a bit hard to explain on this side, but if you want to know more, come chat to me after. A few other things once you finish a test. I guess before you get to finish the test, there's a couple of things to think about as well. First is what happens if I don't reach significance, right? So that typically is when your user size is quite small. This is where common sense will kick in. So, whatever you can do to get some data signals, you should be able to move on from that. So if you can't get to significance, it's not the end of the world. You don't want to run it for years, right? The second thing is no peeking of the results. So that's something, a lot of us are guilty of. So by peeking the results is basically looking at the results every day, and before you reach significance, you decided to do something else. So it's very hard not to do so, but I would recommend you can peek, but don't do anything about it unless you have been flashing red on the counter metrics. Otherwise, make sure you reach statistical significance to decide on what to roll out. After you tested, after you gather your statistics and you know which one is a winning group, what you want to do, first of all, is properly conclude your test. This might sound very obvious, but you'll be surprised, sometimes when a big product team do a cleanup, there's a lot of tests that hasn't been switched off. So a proportion of the users are still being subjected to a test variant. So you want to make sure you put in processes at the end of any A/B test, make sure double check everything has been cleaned up. Second of all, document and share the results that you have gathered. And this goes back to the point before when not to test. So a third scenario is don't test something you have tested. That is a waste of time, waste of resources. So those are the things for myself.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, Candice. Brilliant. Okay, that brings us to the Q&A section of this event this evening. What we will do is we will slowly move those stools that we've got over there here into the middle. and we will have around 15 minutes of Q&A. So just bear with us very shortly while we start to move the chairs across. Excellent. Okay, so just a reminder as well, on the Slido here this evening, you have the opportunity to vote for your favorite questions. Depending on the number of questions we get, we might not get a chance to go through them all. So if you see questions that stand out to you, please do upvote them, and they will come to the top of my phone. Okay, just give probably a minute more for people to do that, and then we will start with the questions. Okay, so some of these are specifically for some of the panelists, and then some of them are more for the whole team. Although I will say, if you feel like you've got points to add, please feel free to jump in and share. Excellent. Okay, so one at the top here, Candice, everyone's really curious to know what was the outcome of the try for £0 and 0 pence versus the try for free testing.
That was just an example. Oh, sorry. That was just an example. Really sorry. But if someone tested it out, let us know.
Perfect. Thank you. Brilliant. One for Diana next. So question here, how are product goals set in your organization? Do you have a North Star top-down approach from management? How much are PMs involved in this process?
Yeah, really good question. I think each company does it slightly differently, but at the moment we will have our company metrics, the direction we want to go into, and they're really high level. They'll be like, okay, we want to make this much money every year, and then we have like this in ClearScope. We have two missions. So we have a life cycle and a marketplace mission, and each one of them will have the North Star metric. And I think it's really important to be quite specific. I think PMs can help define that, but I think it's okay to have a North Star metric and then have the freedom to decide how you're actually going to influence that, especially if the North Star metric is at the moment, our one is for life cycles is increase the number of the average number of months a user comes back in a year. Now that's so broad. You could do loads of different things with that. It's just a measurement of engagement. And then I think product managers get involved when it comes to, okay, how can my team contribute towards that North Star? What is my role? Like, what's the remit of my team? And then we decide our own kind of OKRs and what can we impact on a 3-month cadence.
Excellent, thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that side? No, perfect. Okay, there's a few questions for you here, Rohan. So I'll just combine these two, I think. So a question here around advice with regard to free text on surveys, tips particularly around that on engagement. Often they find that a survey which has got free text is dismissed very quickly. And then just combining that one with how often do you ask users the disappointment question?
Yeah, great questions. I find that with when you're asking anyone to put in free text, yes, engagement is low. This only works when you've got a wide enough base of customers that enough volume is going to come through. So of the thousands of customers who may see that come up, we'll only get a couple of hundred survey responses. But what we get from there is very insightful. Sorry, remind me of the second part there.
Yes, the second part of the question was just how often do you ask users the disappointment question?
Yeah, the monthly product market fit survey is asked monthly.
Excellent. Makes sense, right? Thank you.
Weekly, you're going to just annoy the crap out of everyone. Quarterly, it's just too infrequent to notice really any sort of trend.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
There's sophisticated ways of doing this. So actually different products at Atlassian have different tooling set up. So they tend to run theirs a little bit differently. Jira Software, for example, all fancy home-built tools, they will ask on a rolling basis, and they make sure that if you've answered it once, then they won't ask you again for the next 3 months or something like that. Us and Jira Product Discovery are much less sophisticated, but we use Pendo actually. We're really big fans of Pendo, use it for a lot of what we do. All our quant stuff comes from Pendo, but it was the easiest thing for us to set up through Pendo. And we just essentially run that survey. We create a segment, expose that segment of customers to that survey for a week, and then we close it after a week, and if they didn't see it, they didn't see it.
Thank you. So one for all the panelists here, and I think I'll go to you first, Candice, if that's okay. So what's an example of an app or product that you found really useful in your own journey when it comes to testing?
So we've been asked this question a lot, especially Google is sunsetting Optimizely at the moment. There's a lot of testing products out there. I would say our recommendation is always, actually the principle is really simple. All you need is a way to randomize your user base and tag them, right? And the rest of the journey, you're already collecting the data, either through Pendo or some other backend systems or other tools. So you should have all those data. So really what you need to solve is that two things, allocating users and tagging them. If you have a internal data stack, or this is something also your engineering team could do. And that gives you a lot of flexibility as well. So that tend to be our recommendation. I don't know what.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it depends on the scale of the company as well, because I think, yeah, it's around the like minimum requirements, like Candice was saying about, you know, randomizing and showing to different people, and that can happen loads of different ways. I think the other consideration was, when I thoughtful, was like, can you do A/B testing both on web as well as apps? There's certain tools that only cover web, but if you want to actually look at the end-to-end journey, you have apps, you have to consider that. I guess it's like, I don't have any tools, I guess, I really enjoy. I think I use a lot of Amplitude, and I know they're doing A/B testing now, but I think I've tried loads of different ones, and I still think there's gaps. I think the biggest gap with any tool is the fact that it's very difficult to visualize competing tests. So maybe one tool that can show that, you know, what's actually happening across the company, that would be really useful. But no, again, I think it's a lot of flexibility with A/B testing.
On my side, I've only really ever used home-built A/B testing software. So at Atlassian, big company, use home-built stuff previously in B2C startups, where it was a bit like Bumble in the sense that we've got a high volume of traffic, so it made sense to invest heavily in it. But it's kind of surprising. Well, whenever you're building any sort of internal tooling like this, it's not just the upfront cost. You've got to invest heavily in maintaining it and improving it over time. So yeah, really big investment.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think this next question's a really interesting one, and I think it's probably a pain point that a lot of PMs experience. But it's around kind of, and actually I'd be really curious as well to get your thoughts on this, Candice, around and what you expect here. So when you're working with senior leaders, stakeholders who tell you just to ship stuff quickly, how do you tell the story, I guess? How do you make them see the value in the data to make the data-driven decisions?
Sometimes failure is the best education, right? So unfortunately, I mean, if logics fail, we've seen situations with brands and founders, especially if you're at your early stage, time is so precious. Someone's going to come in, copy your idea and do it better. So if you don't do it quickly, the best way you possibly could, then opportunity is out the window. And this is where there's probably the strongest argument. You can't wait to perfect one idea over 6 to 12 months before you roll it out and decide, okay, the market actually didn't want it, or the market isn't ready for it, or the market is not willing to pay for it. All that is possible. We've seen amazing product that is a bit ahead of its time, unfortunately. But if you had released it quickly through our A/B testing, or just a beta release even, then you get those feedback really early and you can pivot. You always get a data signal. So I guess try on those arguments. If that doesn't happen, then I guess you could viciously let something go and run for a while, and then 6 months later, or hopefully 2 weeks later, you realize, okay, this is not the right thing to do. We need to go back to A/B test principles.
Brilliant. Thank you. Do either of you have anything further you'd like to add on that one?
Yeah, on my side, I think that when it comes to quant, as Candice said in her presentation, it's generally about the risk that you're willing to take. That's why the test is there, to help you get comfort on that risk. But to refer back to what I was talking about with qualitative data, if you're doing lots of customer interviews, if you're speaking to customers regularly, in a situation like that where someone's pressuring you to ship quickly, I think you can back your gut if you've been speaking to a lot of customers and you've got a strong idea of what they want.
Brilliant. Thank you. Diana, question directly for you here. Any examples from your work of creative leading metrics that you've tried to measure that later turned out to be lagging?
That's a really good question. I need to now think about it.
While you think about it, I actually had an opposite example. I know Dana had LTV as a lagging matrix, but you can turn it into a leading matrix by predicting it. So if you have predicted LTV, at lots of companies like Bumble, for example, we had an algorithm within 15 minutes of someone registering for the app, we have a prediction on how much they're going to be worth to the company. So that is a way you flip that around. So, so when you have the predicted LTV, you can tie it back to your marketing, for example. So instead of optimizing towards cost per impressions or cost per clicks, you have something much more long term, right? So if you know you're spending, let's say, $1 million on a campaign, and you have measures like how many clicks and even how much purchases, the dollar value, for example. But if you know that the worth to you, then you can have a much better measurement of the quality of the users you're bringing in, especially if you're a subscription product, because they're not just going to pay once, they're going to come back and pay every month. That's one use case. The other use case is you can start labeling your VIP customers, right? And then you can start cohorting them before they become, that's when they become lagging. You don't want to wait for a year and realize this is, really high value customers. And then you miss 12 months of treating them better.
Yeah, maybe I thought about it. I don't know. I think the one that I think when it comes to engagement or setting up retention or being able to drive people to hey, we want to increase people coming back or engage more. I think that's a lot where you have a go at different leading indicators, and then you have your hypothesis of oh, if they engage with this part of the app, then we believe they're going to keep coming back. But actually, you have the leading indicator, but if you're not confident, it will still take you a few months to work out if they did come back. So I think this is where in the retention space, it's a long game. You do have to learn about your customers, and then in order to help with that, I think a lot of segmentation or understanding what is your core proposition or what actions you want people to take, knowing that that's going to lead to us further action. Not sure if that helped, but yeah, I think it's sometimes you have to have a go at different behaviors you think are going to drive engagement, but that's the one that I always kind of get stuck on, or is the one that's harder to predict and to get confident. I think with conversion, a lot of the leading indicators you can validate so much quicker, but in that space, yeah, you kind of still end up waiting a bit of time before you know the answer.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've probably got time for around 2 more questions. I just wanted to see if anyone in the room here had a direct question they wanted to ask, or we can go back to the Slido. Is anyone here confident enough to ask a question here to our panelists? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious, Rohan, obviously you've got that survey where you ask people if they'd be disappointed if they left the product. I just wonder, obviously that's one indicator, and it's a very strong one for retention, but then what constellation of measures do you look at to gauge the overall success of the adoption of your product?
We have a whole heap of more sophisticated quantitative metrics that we look at for that. So often the day 1 to 30 conversion is a metric that we focus on a lot. So the customers that we know are trialing or assessing our product, are they finding value in it and getting good value from it? That's one. And another main one I would say is seat expansion. So the way customers typically adopt our product is there's someone in a larger org who comes in and tries it out, and we know it's working if they then spread it to multiple people within their org and start using it as a team. So yeah, that's actually more of the metric that we would look at for performance of the product. But again, you need to look at all of these together to paint the bigger picture. Every single one of them on their own has its pros and cons. It's not going to tell you enough by itself.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think last question for today really, and this is a particular use case, but I wonder maybe it's worth just giving some thoughts around the topic in general. But for this particular individual, PM at a startup, looking for advice on analyzing quantitative data in particular, if the team doesn't have a data analyst or data scientist as part of their team.
Early stages, I would say off-the-shelf tools. So Pando, we have a good example sitting right next to me on the right. And Dana uses Amplitude, for example. But there's a lot of off-the-shelf tools. Like even if you just use GA4 or Google Analytics, that's pretty good. What you want is get the data signal of the direction you're traveling.
Yeah, I think, I have been in situations where you do have no data, but you will have an engineer. And again, it's like use those tools. It's really important to prioritize what are the key metrics. Start with that and be like, okay, we're going to implement the core journey metrics. And then you kind of start building out. But again, it comes back to like, what are the key questions you want to know about? And if there is nothing there, start putting the basics in place. And if you have other questions where, implementing a lot of data will take a lot of time, probably think more creatively around, do you want to do any more like fake door test or like different ways in which you can, again, validate or talk to a few more customers. I think it's just around being really clear what is the question and being as specific as you can, and then kind of prioritize, go for the biggest question you have, and then build it out that way. So you don't waste time on, spending 6 months implementing a tool and cover every analytic scenario, and then actually that still doesn't answer your question. So I think it's just be frugal or be really specific on your questions, and then kind of take it one at a time.
Amazing. Anything you'd like to add to that one, Rohan?
I was a data analyst before I was a product manager. So write SQL for yourself, put it in spreadsheets, make graphs.
Brilliant. Amazing. Well, thank you everyone again for joining today, both online and in the room here. Some amazing speakers this evening. So please, one more time for our speaker group this evening. Brilliant. Okay, well, that concludes today's ProductTank event. Please feel free to continue with the refreshments and stick around for networking if you want to speak to anyone who's here.